Hello, welcome to Little Literati. I'm Jess and this is my January wrap-up video. If you saw my video last month, you know that I had a huge stack of books to choose from, and I knew I wasn't going to get around to reading all of them. I actually read a lot more than I expected to, especially given some circumstances this month. So these are the ones I did get around to reading, and I'll read some of the rest in February. But I read Cruel Crown, which is a bind-up of two novellas in the Red Queen universe, Queen Song and Steel Scars. I didn't love this. I didn't really even particularly like it terribly a lot because the first story was too short and then ended really tragically. And I already knew what was going to happen because it's kind of a prequel little story, but it was just really heartbreaking. And it was just really hard to read. The second one was really hard to get into just because it wasn't as interesting. It didn't help that there are all these redacted memos between all the different characters because they're the Scarlet Guard. Even find one now, but there were just a lot of redacted memos, and so it got kind of confusing as to who was talking to whom. And I'm not really a fan of Farley anyway, and so following her around was not my idea of fun. But this was Cruel Crown. It was a really quick read. I think it's only like 140 pages all told. I also read Glass Sword, which is the second book in the Red Queen series. I actually liked this less than I liked Red Queen because this got really, really angsty and really fast, and I understand that a lot of people are teenagers in this series, but it was really hard. I kind of liked Mare and her bravery in the first book. In this one, it was all about, I don't really know who I am, and I'm having to fight different parts of myself, and it was that over and over again, and it got to be more than I really wanted to handle, and it kind of took a twist partway through, and I'm not really a fan of dystopia books and one-upping authority figures, and I don't know, this reminded me kind of like Hunger Games, and I wasn't really a fan of that trilogy either. So I'm hoping that King's Cage is able to kind of wrap it up and bring me back into it, but this one kind of lost me there for a while. These next two I read at the very beginning of the month. These are the first two in the Girl of Fire and Thorns series. There's Girl of Fire and Thorns and Crown of Embers, and I really enjoyed these. The first one I really enjoyed because even though the main character doesn't always know exactly what she's doing, she uses common sense and she figures out kind of, well, that logically seems to be the best route, that's what I'm going to go do. And so she's able to try to save her people just by using her brain, which is kind of a novelty in young adult books because kids are still kind of figuring out who they are, but this one, even though she didn't know, she was sensible about it, and she had a good head on her shoulders, and I really kind of appreciated that breath of fresh air. The second book I liked even better, if that was possible, because in this one she knows who she is, and she's embracing the power that she has and isn't afraid of her power anymore. She is ready and willing to yield it for the good of her people, and I'm really looking forward to the third one. It kind of ended on a cliffhanger on this one, and I did finally check out the third one, so I'm going to be really looking forward to reading that in February. These next two I got around to reading were the Ravenflight and the Collar, which were books 2 and 3 in the Shadowfell series. I wanted to get these done because, again, these did come from a different library district, so I wanted to finish these and be able to return them and not have to recheck them out. They did pick up. I know I said the first one kind of was slow there, which was odd since it was a young adult book instead of one of her adult series. But in these, she was actually able to go and fulfill her quest. She went and talked to all the different guardians around Albion and was able to be taught how to channel her gift, which really comes into play in the third one especially, and tried to save, again, the kingdom. Apparently I'm drawn to that theme. I read Across a Star-Swept Sea. This is the future dystopia version of A Scarlet Pimpernel. And I really enjoyed this because I liked the dichotomy between the two lands. It's very similar to the French Revolution, where the Scarlet Pimpernel actually took place in that book. The two kingdoms are completely different, and they each are convinced that they're right, and that they're going about it the right way, and that the other guy is wrong. And the way that the main character Persis balances that is really, really well done, and I really was rooting for her. It was hard to read sometimes when she was being her airhead bimbo self, because it's like, but I know you're smarter than that, and you know you're smarter than that, and I wish that you didn't have to hide who you really are just to try to save lives. But it was a noble thing, and it was interesting having it adapted for like probably hundreds of years in the future. So Across the Starswept Sea was definitely a lot of fun, and some of the characters from For Darkness Shows the Stars did make an appearance. They weren't a huge part of it, really. They were just kind of in the background, but it was still fun to see those characters, and I'll probably add these to my shelf eventually. I read Till We Have Faces by C.S. Lewis. This is my book club book for this month, so I actually have to go and discuss it tomorrow. I did read this, and this is a retelling of the Cupid Psyche myth. And I usually love everything of C.S. Lewis's that I read, and this was an interesting book. It's told from the perspective of the ugly older sister. And so she's like, here's the true story. Here's what really happened. I wasn't jealous. I was acting out of love and protection for my little sister, and I didn't really believe that she was married to a god, and so I was trying to help her escape her madness, really. And so it follows the older sister, and really Psyche is just a secondary character, even a tertiary character at times. We don't even see her in the second half of the book, which I have to say was kind of quirky because, I mean, the whole payoff for the myth is that Psyche goes and, has to fulfill all these tasks for Aphrodite in order to marry her son and actually be able to stay with her son at the end. And we don't ever really see the resolution. I mean, the character talks about seeing Psyche in a vision, but again, we never see Psyche. We never see the payoff of the end of the story. And it just kind of goes off on a weird tangent. And so I was like, well, that's interesting, but it doesn't really have anything to do with the story that you're telling. And it just kind of ends, and he just kind of flitters around, and it was really hard to follow the point. But it was interesting. It was a funky little story, and I don't think I loved this enough to want to ever have it, but it was interesting to have read once. And, it's C.S. Lewis, so it was definitely interesting. And he was able to speak in a female mind in a way, like he actually didn't do it half bad. I was like, oh yeah, this is a man writing this. And obviously I'm a woman, so there were some things I was like, well, we don't exactly think that way. But there were other times I was like, man, I was actually impressed that he kind of got that part spot on. So anyway, it was just an interesting little side note on this book. Speaking of book clubs, I did not finish Alexander Hamilton. I read probably the first 50 pages or something like that. I really tried, but it was not striking my interest, and we decided we weren't going to be discussing it in book club anyway, and it was coming to the library. So I just turned it in, and maybe eventually I'll try reading it again. I know a lot of people that were in the book club listened to it on audio, like on car trips. I'm like, well, that's what I needed to do. I needed to listen to it over like the car trip for Thanksgiving or Christmas or whatever. But anyway, I did not read that one, so got a chance to read other things. I read The Librarians and the Lost Lamp, and this was a lot of fun too. The author, there were things I liked about his style a lot, like the characterizations. It's like, that is so that character. Ezekiel would totally do that. That is exactly how Eve would react in this situation. That's exactly how I would picture them. That I was able to hear their voices, and I was able to see their little idiosyncrasies and just experience their little quirks. There were a couple things about this writing style that wasn't my cup of tea. He tended to over describe things, and he would use verbs that weren't particularly strong, and then he would use a bunch of adjectives to try to stack on top of that and try to get the point across. I feel like he could have just used maybe stronger verbs in some cases, and then there were some cases where he used verbs and then followed them up with adjectives or adverbs that completely reiterated the verb he just used, and so they were completely unnecessary and redundant. So I don't know, that was a little hard to get over, because I would be reading along and then that would happen. I'm like, yes, I know, you just said that. It kind of jolts me out of the story. But the story itself was a lot of fun, and about the lost lamp and the evil djinn that's inside the lamp, and trying to retrieve the lamp before the bad guys destroy the lamp to release the genie. So it was silly and quirky, and I really enjoyed it. I'm probably going to buy the second book when it comes out later this year as well. This was Nemesis. This was the first book that I got through Fairy Loot in November, and it's been sitting on my shelf waiting for me to finally get around to reading it, and I've been feeling really guilty I hadn't had a chance to read it. So I made a concerted effort to actually sit down and read this month. And at first, when I was first reading it, I didn't love it because the way the author would write things, it was kind of similar to the writing quirks of this, but not quite. She would word things and arrange her sentences backwards sometimes, and it was just hard to get to the root of her sentence sometimes. I'm like, why not just make it so it's clear for your readers? So my husband actually went to bed, he's like, no, don't stay up too late reading this. I was like, oh, don't worry, I'm not really loving this, I'll probably be up to bed in like 15 minutes. And right as I had set myself a time, I was like, I'm going to up to bed at this time. I'm not going to stay up reading this time because I had stayed up reading till like 4 in the morning, 3 days in a row with some of these other books. It's like, I'm not going to do that because I have to get up tomorrow and take my daughter to school. And so I set myself a time and write like moments before the time came, the book got good and really picked up. Because she wasn't worried about sounding pretentious in her writing anymore. She was more focused on the characters and the interactions between the characters, and that was really a lot more fun and more interesting to read than the clunky way she was writing in the first maybe quarter of the book. But it got good, and so I did end up staying up till like 2 in the morning reading it, and then read the last 100 pages, I think 60 pages, the next day when I was waiting for her to get out of school. But it did get really interesting. The only problem with this book was that it ends in a really crucial spot. It's not even a cliffhanger, it's worse than that. It ends in the middle of their conversation. Like, they don't even just have the situation and they're just leaving it unresolved. No. We don't get to figure out how they finish their sentence, their conversation, for another year until the sequel comes out. So that's aggravating. But what are you gonna do? So the sequel, Ally, comes out, I think, in October. I think is what I was reading. But anyway, so I will probably be picking that up too, so I can find out how the conversation ends, what do they decide, how are they gonna solve their problem that they're both involved in, and, you know, work it all out. So this one did get really good, really interesting towards the end, and then just abruptly ends, which was hard. The last book that I read, I don't have a copy of because it was an ebook, and I read Gilded Ashes, which is an ebook novella that's by the same author and in the same world as Cruel Beauty, and so it's Cinderella instead of Beauty and the Beast, and the fairy godmother is actually the girl's mother's ghost who's watching out for her, and she actually is scared of her mother's ghost because if she ever shows sadness or fear or anything like that, her mother will pretty much annihilate the person that hurt her daughter. And so she is always fake smiling to try to keep her mom's spirit at bay. And so it was just an interesting take on that. And I thought that was a really fun story. And I really wish there was a way to have it in hard copy because I don't like having ebooks. I like having things I can hold in my hand and flip through. And so I really wish that they could even re-release an edition of the Cruel Beauty and put that in just like as an extra bonus at the end, but because it wasn't very long, I think it was only like between 40 and 80 pages. It wasn't a very long book at all, but it was really fun and really dark, but really interesting. So those were the books I read. I read 11 books total, counting the little novellas and everything, and which was not quite the 15 that I picked out, and there were some books that I traded out, but I did a lot better than I was expecting to, especially given some personal tragedy that happened this month. So I will let you know what I'm planning on reading in February, but I hope that you read good things. Let me know in the comments what you read this month, what you recommended, maybe what you think I should pass over if I ever come across it. Please engage me in the comments. I would love to hear what you're reading. So let me know, and in the meantime, read good books.